Hello and welcome to my how to paint Gloomspite Gitz Rabble-Rowza video. This chap has been sat on my desk for the better part of 3 years, so let's get him ready to rouse a rabble. We're starting from a white Zenithal Prime over black here, but you could easily work from black, grey or white. We will be starting by using some Incubi Darkness to go over all the areas we want to be skin. Now this might seem a little dark at first, but will give us our recessed colour to then work up from. We can then cover most of this with Nurgling Green, leaving the Incubi Darkness in those areas we want to read as shadows or shade. Utilizing some thinned Coelia Greenshade, we can then go over the shadow areas to try and better blend the two colours. Next, we're going to add some Vallejo Bone White into our Nurgling Green, roughly 50-50, to start picking out some of the raised areas that we want to highlight or draw attention to. The cloth is the next biggest area, so let's get cracking on with that. We're going to be using a 3-to-1 mix of Vallejo Black to Dark Reaper. You could probably substitute this for Corvus Black if you don't fancy mixing. Next, we're going to be using Dark Reaper to highlight the cloth, and we're looking to target all the folds, the holes, and the edges with this in a slightly thicker or chunky highlight. Now we can add some Dawnstone into the Dark Reaper and use this to do a fine highlight. We're looking to go over some of the edges that we've just done. And then taking some Administratum Grey, we're now just going to pick out the highest raised edges in the cloth or the areas where two folds kind of overlap. And here's how that looks. So let's focus on some of the other bits of the models, starting with the Flappy Squiggs. For the wings, we will make a 50-50 mix of black and Khorne red to get this nice maroon colour. And next up for the Flappy Squiggs, we will use just Khorne red for the main body. Then taking some Mephiston Red, we can go over most of the Khorne red we've just placed, leaving the darker Khorne red in the folds and the recesses. Last bit on the red skin now, we're just going to pick out some of the uppermost areas of the skin folds, or the areas we want to emphasize, using Squigg Orange. Next, let's finish up those wings by adding some Administratum Grey into our wing mix and start picking out the inner edge of the wing membrane and also the curved edges. Everyone's favourite next, the eyes, and we will use some Ulthuan Grey to pick out the eyeball, making sure to leave some of that dark red colour showing around the edges. For the pupil of the eye, we'll just use some of our wing membrane colour as we have it handy on the palette, but honestly any black or off black would be absolutely fine here. And you're just looking to paint the upper area of the eyeball. And hey, at least with Squiggs, it doesn't matter if they look a little bit derpy. Then using some Iyanden yellow contrast, we'll paint over the whole eye to give it a nice vibrant yellow. We may as well get the other eyes out of the way here, so we're going to use some Mephiston Red and we'll pick out the Goblin's Eyes, just blocking those out. We'll then take some Fire Dragon Bright and paint a small circle in the eyeball now. And then, just because we like to punish ourselves, We will attempt to place a dot of Flash Gitz Yellow in the circle we just made. Next area is the bones, the teeth, and the spikes, and to keep things simple, we'll be using the same paints for all of these areas. We'll begin basing them in Steel Legion Drab. Just be careful to not cover anything we've already finished here. Then, using some Rakarth Flesh, we're going to pick out about 2/3 of the areas we've just covered. Palid Witch Flesh now just to cap these off, looking to cover the last third of these parts, essentially highlighting the area. With those areas complete, next thing we can begin to tackle is the weapon handles, and for that we need some Dryad Bark. Okay, going back to Steel Legion Drab next, and we'll be using this to highlight the wood grain and any notches or knots in the wood, but also to base coat all of the areas of rope on the model as well as the straps. We're then going to use some Vallejo Bone White just to pick up the rings of the rope and the cloth straps around his wrist, and also the strap on the bag of shrooms on his back. We will also be using this to pick out all of the mushroom stalks. With some Screamer Pink now we can quickly base coat in the cap of the mushroom on the base, and then we're going to take some Seraphim Sepia and paint it all over every single mushroom stalk. Then using some Mechanicus Standard Grey, we're going to paint this all over the rocks on the base. This closely matches the Astro Granite texture paint we added to fill in the edges of the base. Administratum Grey next, and we'll use this to pick out all of the barnacles on the bones as well as a dry brush for all of the stonework and the purple mushroom cap on the base. We can then quickly use some Frost Heart contrast paint and feather this out around the top of the mushroom on the base to give it that nice blue glow. Speaking of mushrooms, let's very swiftly paint those scarlet caps on the bag on his back using Mephiston Red. Whilst we're in the area, we may as well pick out the pouch holding these mushrooms. We're going to be using some Incubi Darkness. And if you've been super careful, you won't need to paint his toenails with this as well. I, however, was not so careful, so I'll be just painting them in now. With some Sotek Green, we can then look to highlight the pouch as well as the toenails. Now back to Ulthuan Grey, and we'll be using this to pick out the small mushrooms on the bones as well as the dots on the scarlet caps, and we will also be using this to highlight the tips of the barnacles. We're on the home straight now, and there are very few bits left to pick out, namely metallics, and there's only a few here. The big tooth on the Squigg skull, his weapons, and there's some bangles on his arm. And for all of these, we're going to start using Leadbelcher. Using some Cryptek Armourshade gloss next, we'll use this on the tooth cap and his dangly bell thing on his wrists. We can then use some black Templar contrast paint over the parts of the weapons that we want to be a black metal as opposed to silver. Then going back in with our Leadbelcher, we can tidy things up a bit or highlight any areas that we want to add some interest to or to be more metal, things like scratches or edges of the weapons. Last detail to pick out is a tiny moon on the hilt of his scythe, and for that we're going to use some Averland Sunset. Alright, here he is, ready to rouse your rabble in the mortal realms. If you've enjoyed this video or found parts of it useful, please do like and subscribe, and do drop us a comment below. If you know someone you think could benefit from the video, feel free to share it with them. We are trying to grow the channel, so every little push helps. Thank you all for watching, and I will catch you on the next one. Take care.